This episode is brought to you by our partnership with Kelly Education.
So let's start with a little step.
Start there.
Let's have our paper every day. Let's do this every day. And then once you've met that goal, you get to another. It's like having a conversation about losing weight. I want to lose a bunch of weight. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
I didn't gain it overnight.
Yeah.
You know, but I can set little goals.
That's right.
I can change little things. And once you get a student to realize it's the little things that add up to the big, it makes a huge difference.
Welcome back to another episode of the Ignite Project podcast. And today I'm with a math teacher, which is like after my own heart. I always love, there's something special about math teachers. All teachers are special, but really, I'm a little biased. But Joanne, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy that you could be here for our episode today.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
So math teacher, Auburndale High. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to be at Auburndale?
Well, I started went to USF. I'm a graduate of Lakeland High School, so I am a Polk County graduate.
Yeah.
Graduated in 1995. Actually had someone here at the school board put my name out. Got hired by Mr. Landere his last year there. And I was at Auburndale for 6 years, decided to move to Ohio for a couple years. I've been back in Polk County. This is working on my 10th year, and I've been back at Auburndale for the last almost 7. So
you have got some history with Auburndale.
Yes, I have actually had every single principal since Bill Landere.
Wow.
So a little bit of each of their years.
Brings you some perception and perception. Yeah, I love that. So you are a teacher with geometry honors and liberal arts.
Yes, correct? And this is our first year bringing back liberal arts. It's because we saw that there was a huge gap between the students because of the 18 months of COVID living teaching, actually. So we brought in liberal arts as a buffer for those students who didn't meet their Algebra 1 EOC and before they took geometry.
Gotcha.
So we could get that test component out of the way or build up their math skills so that hopefully next year when they do go into geometry, that they'll have a little bit more success and feel more grounded and back to the way things were 2 years ago.
I like that I don't know if it's you in general or just the system has recognized that, because I think we look back, and I was a teacher, ended my 10th year when COVID had just hit. So I was finishing up that school year. So we talk about all the time in teacher engagement, how we lean into our teachers and our colleagues to share their stories because we have not experienced it ourselves. But based on that data, there's a chunk of time that these kids have missed. And so
huge.
To be able to bridge that gap and provide a little bit of that stepping stone for success is really major. I really want to focus on this topic first about mathematics and teaching math. The fact that I get to be in front of a high school math teacher is I'm geeking out a little bit. But what really cultivated such a passion for you to teach math when most people find it an incredibly intimidating subject?
Well, I got lucky. When I was at USF studying special ed, actually, you had a choice. You could do reading, which I love to read, but I like to read for fun.
Yeah.
Or math. And math was easy to me. So I did the math-focused of special ed. So even though when you're becoming a special ed teacher, you have to be across the gamut because you could be in an English class or a science class or social studies, my main focus was math. And I got blessed that back then they still did self-contained. And when I got hired, it was to be a self-contained math teacher. However, I went on maternity leave in year 3. And my principal then was Mr. Partain, and the district had a plan where special ed teachers could get their math certification. And somehow they liked my sub during my pregnancy and hired her for my position, and a teacher had retired. And they're like, you have great classroom discipline. Boom, put you in here.
Let's get you going.
And I'm like, I'm out of certification. And they're like, no, the district will pay for this, this, and this. So I got my 5 through 9.
That's amazing.
And then a couple of years ago, the district had the same plan, and I got my 6 through 12. So I'm actually 6 through 12, K through K through 12 special ed.
You're like a
and 6 through 12 math.
diamond in the like you are.
I don't like thinking it that way. I don't like thinking about it that way. But yeah, I mean, and for me, math comes a little easy. Now, don't ask me to explain some pre-calc topics. I will defer to my colleagues at the school who are amazing at it. Not calc any close. Statistics, if we want to talk baseball and stats, we're good. But what I do, I'm good at.
Right.
At least I've been told.
Yeah. And that kind of goes into what we were talking about with your administrator and why you're recommended is that you were given this recommendation of you are an out-of-the-box thinker and the way you communicate and work with your students. So with that background in, special education, and then you're working with math, how has that kind of helped you navigate the waters when you're trying to engage these high schoolers with the type of math that you're teaching? Basically, how have you gone through and learned important lessons in order to teach these students? Because a typical high schooler isn't going to be super excited over the top, over the moon about walking in your class.
Well, one of the best things that I think the special ed focus does is that you learn about where students plateau. You learn about scaffolding really well.
Yeah.
So I think what he likes to see is that I know how to scaffold, and not just scaffold like here's point A, here's point B, here's point C, but okay, if this is where I need the students to be, in 4th grade, what did they do? In 5th grade, what did they do? In 7th grade, what did they do? Especially like my 9th graders who are sitting in my geometry class.
Yeah.
I know that they, in their 7th grade math class, 4th quarter, when they should have been learning their geometry topics, they were at home on a computer.
Yeah.
So I know that. And so I know that I have to work that in somehow, that there's gaps between the kids. And one of the things that my principal and the school in general has always been allowed me to do is that I'll have an array of students from your special ed to your ESOL to your Access Child in one of my regular ed geometry classes. And when you walk into my class, my goal as a teacher is you can't tell who's who.
That's crazy. That's crazy awesome.
That's because I have honest conversations with my students.
Okay.
And I've had to have a lot more in liberal arts. So that's actually been a real eye-opener for me, because you have these students who've never grasped integers, who've never grasped this is the x squared button on a calculator.
Right.
And I take them back to where they're at. And my goal is to say, okay, I may need you to do compound transformations, but hold on, wait. You never caught on to graphing correctly. So when you graph correctly, I make sure I point out, wow, look, hey, yeah, we're not quite where I need you to be right now, but you didn't confuse graphing with slope.
Right.
You did left to right first, not up and down. And we celebrate that success. And like a girl that today in class, she actually said, one more step, I'm getting
so
closer.
Cool.
And we were working on the quadratic equation. And she's actually got the quadratic equation down. She's got where to substitute and how to substitute, but she confuses just slightly at the end if she has an extra negative.
Yeah.
And for her, it's pushing buttons on a calculator.
Yeah.
I know with this young lady that she may never able to crunch 3 integer numbers in her head. But if I can give her a tool that she can use on a test, especially when she takes her ACT, and that she can do it proficiently, why not give her that ability?
Right.
But for me to get there, I got to get the students to see that it's time to stop using photomath.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. I've heard about this.
I love photomath. And I even tell the students there's a time and a place to use it.
Right.
And like a student the other day, he came in with a piece of paper, 1 problem done. I said, okay, you got 1 done. And he looked at me, he goes, I photomathed 1. You said we can do that. It made no sense. And I said, good. Now let's go through and look at my example and what photomath told you. And we walk through it.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, wait a second. I just do this? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, why did they do all this then? And I said, so that math teacher like me knows that X is an X and not a time symbol.
Right.
Because that's what photomath does. Hopefully no students are watching this. Because that's how all teachers can tell when a student's used photomath.
Right.
They use X's and extra parentheses and all this extra pencil. Like I tell the students, you're going to use a lot of pencil lead. I'm not.
Right.
So let's show you my way first.
Yeah. And it sounds like, number one, I hear you say repeatedly, you have to know your students, right?
You have to.
You have to know where they're trying to go, where they're at, in order to build that scaffold for them.
Yes.
And also into being constant communication. So we like to bring back, obviously with COVID, like you and I, two separate opposite ends. Like you have been through it, and I started, I ended a chapter of teaching right
you got to
when
see
it
the
started.
little bit,
Yes,
but you didn't get to see what has happened because of it. So I get it.
For sure, I'm more curious about, you've got all of these different conversations that need to happen when you're building relationships and scaffolding. How do you do that, especially during an opportunity where you have kids who were maybe present during COVID or maybe not present during COVID, and they're in all these different places? How do you handle a math class that has those elements?
So Not now. I could tell you just about any student in my class where they're at because I've built that up over a 25-year career.
Right.
However, when I first started, I had a teacher who told me give every student a folder.
Okay.
And they're multicolored.
Okay.
So you get one of those rainbow things of colors.
Right.
And I'm going to give all my students who get extended time a blue folder. I'm going to give all my students who get something red to them a green folder. I'm going to give all my other students all the other colors if I have it.
Right.
If I have a ESOL kid, he's going to be a color, but maybe another student in the class is also going to get the same color, but I know he's also not an ESOL student. So you have this array of colors in the room, and in the inside of the folder, I can write a note about that student. And I can be like, hey, remember, you get extended time. Hey, you remember, I can read something to you. Or you can ask to test in a different room. Or so that when they get their test or an activity or something, all they have is this folder with a paper in it. And my Access kid could be working on a 3rd grade level.
Right.
Like we're doing congruent shapes right now. And I shouldn't say congruent shapes because we're doing triangle congruency in the geometry topic.
Right.
And my ultimate goal is that they're proficient with proofs.
Okay.
That's the ultimate goal. My Access child is not going to be doing a proof.
Right.
Now, will he be taking the notes when my students take the notes? Yes. However, I do need him to be able to look at congruent figures and be able to know the difference between similar and congruent. And maybe not the word congruent, but the word same for him. So I would write on a little sticky note, congruent equals same. And while he's doing his independent activity, he can reference that word while I'm maybe across the room working with someone else. Now, I don't have to use the folders. I have used them. It has been so successful in the past. But, but that's old school too.
Right.
Teachers nowadays who are more proficient with Excel, it'd be really easy to make an Excel spreadsheet, put it based on your seating chart.
Right.
And if no one knows that in your seating chart, you can put little text boxes on your seating chart. So when my principal comes in, if I hand him my seating chart, you can see these 4 students are doing an independent assignment because they've already had geometry and they're repeating my class.
Yeah.
They've already taken their EOC. They've already not done well, but they need the credit to graduate. They've met their testing requirement. So while I'm having them do this, it's independent, they can work, they ask me questions, but that's this side of the room. If I have a student who needs a little extra on this, you can put a little blurb box on it, and that actually gives you some brownie points in your observations.
Right.
But there's a lot of different ways that you can track what you're doing with your students and that you're scaffolding. But the big thing I have found, you got to get the students to believe it.
Yeah.
You got them to invest. Because as soon as they invest in it, they'll remind you of what they can and can't have and where they're at. And like this one kid the other day, he was doing so great, I completely and totally forgot. I'm like, wow, okay, check that off. We're on to the next step. He goes, I got it, But you got to have those meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
And some kids at the end of the day, it might be the first time someone's ever talked to them about how they learn and where they're at and where they want to go meaningfully.
Yeah.
Like I had a student the other day, goal wants to be a doctor. My sister is a doctor. And I'm like, this is what my sister recommends.
There's already a connection there that you can kind of lean into.
Or you want to do this. So tell me why you're going to skip pre-calc in 2 years.
Yeah. That part,
You know?
I really love that connection between you're building the relationship with the students through conversation, but not only that, you're understanding where each child is at, and then when they recognize where they're at and where they're headed, especially the student that might be done with the assignment, it's not just, okay, you've accomplished your tasks, you're in compliance, but you move forward. Here's the next thing that I can, give you to heighten your understanding and your success, and all of that intertwines together. And the fact that you have that in a class where somebody could walk in and I have no clue where each student is at academically, and I think that's something that's so beautiful and magical sometimes when I don't know where their access point student is, and I don't know where the student who's done and is ready to move on, and they can either collaborate together or they can just be heightened with that learning. Biggest thing is, with your years of success and doing all of these strategies, building these toolkits for these kids, what advice would you give to someone who may be either starting off in teaching high school math or starting off and trying to reach those high expectations and getting those kids to be at that point where they're going to have open conversations with you? What advice would you give to them?
You got to talk to the students.
Yeah.
I mean, that's first thing. And, you can even start like learning who's on the baseball team and who's on this and who's not. Or, hey, you were out the last couple of days, everything okay at home? Little things like that. You got to get them to invest in wanting to be in your room, especially nowadays, because they've already had, some of these kids didn't even step foot in a classroom last year. They did it all behind a computer screen.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And once I'm lucky, I've been at the school long enough, I've taught second generation. And I've taught some interesting. I'm on my second generation, and I have a good rapport with the students, and I have a history. You could go in the cafeteria and gripe about me, and someone's going to be like, what? Her? So I already have that established. Right. You as a person have to find out where you want to be at the end. What is your ultimate goal? Is my goal to have the highest EOC scores in the district? Of course.
Right.
However, I got to build this with the students and figure out where they're at. And I learned a couple of years ago, my first year back at the high school level, I was put into an Algebra 1 class. It was 25 students, 5 students who were on 504, everyone else who was special ed. It was kind of an experiment.
Wow.
I had no one pass the EOC. It destroyed me. However, I had 9 students pass PERT that year.
Okay.
And I had almost 100% learning gains in the class. And I had an honest conversation with my assistant principal at the time. And she's like, why are you so focused on no one got a 3? I'm like, God, that looks awful.
Yeah, because we're really so, regimented to see that and feel like that's how effective we are.
And she made me see that this kid went from a 1 to a high 2 and missed it by a couple of questions. And this kid went from a 425, which we all know in math is the dead score.
Yes.
The kid didn't try.
Yeah.
They fell asleep on the test. They logged in. Okay? However, a kid who got a 491, there was some effort into that. And she's like, he went from that to that. You got to stop judging yourself by an EOC number. And as soon as I stopped doing that and started looking at the students as a individual and be like, there's a lot more to this than just passing a test on a 2-day.
Right.
And that's what it boils down to, is that we're getting judged based on 2 days. And if they got in a fight with their boyfriend before it and their dad and mom are getting divorced the night before.
They're going to be wrecked on that test.
Not necessarily. It depends on what their mindset is.
True. Very true.
Because you've seen the kid who's been homeless. There's movies on Lifetime and all kinds of things. The kid who's been homeless, who's now a doctor and a lawyer and writing a book.
Right.
And we got kids, we don't just know what happened, So the thing is it's all about their mindset. And if between now and that test, I can get it in their head that they can answer X amount of questions correct, whether it's the ACT or SAT or what their goal is. It's like I was talking to a student the other day. You want to do this. Okay, so what's your first step? Well, I want to do this. I said, no. What's your first step? You're telling me you want to go to college. So let's talk about what you don't do.
Yeah.
You don't have your paper every day. You don't even put your last name on the paper. How do I know you're proud of this paper if you can't put first and last name?
Wow, yeah. It's
And
so
he
good.
like looked at me like I was like
Crazy.
And I said, so let's start with a little step.
Let's start there.
Let's have our paper every day. Let's do this every day. And then once you've met that goal, you get to another. It's like having a conversation about losing weight. I want to lose a bunch of weight. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
I didn't gain it overnight.
Yeah.
You know, but I can set little goals.
That's right.
I can change little things. And once you get a student to realize it's the little things that add up to the big, it makes a huge difference. And we don't concentrate on the little enough. You know, it's always about the end result, this test, this, that. No, it's about this is where you're at for point A. I'm going to get you to A.1, A.2, A.3. Then we're at B. Eventually we'll get to Z, like the Amazon with the smile.
Yeah.
You know? So, and I didn't even catch on. It goes A to Z with a smile
That's
until the other day.
I didn't either.
But that's what you got to
perfect,
do
though.
with
Absolutely.
kids.
Absolutely.
You got to get them to see, I got to accomplish this first. And like I specifically tell students when I teach, you're not going to use this in your future life. We were doing proofs the other day. You're not going to use a proof unless you're going to become a mathematician.
Right.
However, the logical reasoning that I'm teaching you, going
gonna
from
use.
step 1, it's the only subject that teaches it.
Right. Yeah.
Let's be honest, it's the only one. You're not even going to see a proof really on an ACT or SAT question. Maybe in a different format. However,
Right.
but you know, you're going to, and I do that when I teach. This is an ACT topic. This is an SAT topic.
Yeah.
This is this.
Bringing that back to real world application.
Yes.
Yeah,
when am I going to
for sure.
use it and where do I want to go?
I love that. And I love that, again, we have so many guests and so many teachers. They go back to building relationships, having conversations that are realistic to the whole child, the whole student. But I love that piece that you just brought in, that element of small steps, because they're overlooked so often and so many times, and that what you're doing to scaffold for these different levels and differentiated students can help them overcome something that seems so big and so overwhelming in their mind. For sure. We always ask our guests the same question just to kind of see where you're coming from, but our whole podcast is kind of built on this word ignite. So if you were going to ignite anything in our district to kind of spark change and create a shift, what would it be? So I want to ignite blank.
So I've actually thought about this because you actually sent me
Yes.
this. And there
Give me
is
some
one
time.
thing that I have been passionate for all my years being as a special ed math person, is that I would love to see, and this is more at the district level, so don't know if it can happen, but I would love to see more students included in the classroom. And to do that, I think for me, I can go in and say, okay, this is what I need for a 3rd grade level.
Right.
I'm trained. Not everyone else is.
Yeah.
I would love to see the special ed department work with the other curriculum areas, and especially at the high school level, and take those standards and come up with a 5-question. This is what a 3rd grade student would do with this question. So that if I'm a history teacher and I'm teaching something on World War II, what is 5 questions that my Access kid could do when it's independent time? So I'm going to have them take the notes when all my students are. I'm going to have them do this. But what I'd love to see is that type of coming together. So that way we can bridge the gap between just those 2 programs.
Right.
And I think if teachers have access to stuff like that, then even taking your special ed student who is only reading on a 2nd grade level and saying, okay, this is what I need them to do to show success in my class, giving them, it might give the teacher more ideas on, okay, so I'm teaching this. Let's first work on building a paragraph with this child. Because it might take them all period to write one well-written paragraph where the rest of the class is writing 5-paragraph essay. You know, I think if we can get where they can see real-world examples, you know, and that could possibly done at a school level if you have people who are trained, but I know at a district level you have the trained people. You just need them to have the communication,
right?
The small steps, and working together to bridge that gap. So you can see this is where a kid can be, this is where they can go. Yeah. I'd love to ignite that. I'd love to see that little change happen because I think it would make for more acceptance. And for me as a first-year teacher who's being told I have to teach this kid, I would have a box of tricks that someone's already come to me when I get
strategies that you feel more comfortable with.
Because let's be honest, the more you can have, the more you can try and be like, this doesn't work for me. Right. This does work for me. But sometimes it's all about just being able to go in and say, okay, I don't even know what to do. Oh, wait, here's 5 questions. When they're doing their bell work, I'm going to give these to this kid. Mm-hmm. Let's see if they can answer these a little bit better. Yeah. And that might be just what's needed to spark that child into investing themselves in that teacher's class.
I love that. I've actually done a couple stay chats where the teachers would definitely love the answer that you just stated. So I'm glad that you shared that with us. Thank you so much again for joining us and sharing not only your story of how you have kind of stayed with Auburndale High for so long. We love to hear about that because the investment we value incredibly, but just kind of sharing your thoughts and opinions on having high expectations and building those relationships with students. So
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Are you fired up? You can continue to fuel the fire by connecting with us here in Teacher Engagement. Every month, we host virtual all-teacher seminars, and we also have ongoing programs designed to support teachers wherever they're at in their teaching career. Whether you're a new teacher or a teacher leader, there is a way to get plugged in. Follow us on social media at TeachEngagePCPS to see all that we have going on. Let's keep that spark alive and join forces with others who have chosen to stay ignited.
Thanks for joining us. You can subscribe to the Ignite Project on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or Spotify, or watch online at the Polk County Public Schools YouTube channel. To learn more about the Ignite Project and other Polk County Public Schools podcasts, go to polkschoolsfl.com/podcasts.